Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to episode 6 of QuickBooks Online Basics for Beginners. Today we're talking all about customers and vendors. I'm going to be honest with you, we have a lot of pro tips in this video today, a lot of little nuggets of information, if you will. So if you can, try to stick around to the end of the video. It also really helps my channel if you watch until the end. So today I'm going to show you how to set both customers and vendors up correctly from the beginning so that you don't make more work for yourself later. Today we're going to talk about what customers and vendors are, where to find them in your file, how to set them up correctly, and which details actually matter, especially if, like I said, you want to save yourself time later. Okay, so how are customers defined in QuickBooks Online? QuickBooks uses names to track who money is coming from and who money is going to. So a customer is just anybody that pays you, and a vendor is just simply anybody that you pay. QuickBooks does not care what you call it. If it's a person, a company, a store, an app, the system only cares about the direction of the money. So a customer could be a client. It could be a patient, a tenant, whatever you call the person or the company that owes you money. As far as QuickBooks is concerned, that's a customer. Vendors, on the other hand, could be a landlord, a subcontractor, a utility company, a store. Anybody that you as a customer pay money to. So first pro tip of the video, one thing to know about QuickBooks Online is that any bill or invoice associated with a vendor, meaning a vendor sends you a bill, in the system, QuickBooks calls that a bill. Anything to do with a customer, on the other hand, such as an invoice or a bill, QuickBooks defines as an invoice. So remember, vendor equals bill, customer equals invoice. So let me show you where to find customers and vendors in QuickBooks. So we're going to start with customers, and like I always say, there's more than one way to get to most things in QuickBooks. So in the new interface, as you can see, we're at the dashboard screen, and customers are right up here on this tab, smack dab in the middle. You can get to customers from here. You can also go to the tabs over on the left-hand side of the screen, go to All Apps, Customer Hub, and Customers. Pro tip number 1. Anytime you hover over any of these tabs, you'll see an outlined flag. If I click on that little flag, it will fill itself in, which means it's being bookmarked. So the next time I want to go to customers, all I need to do is go to my bookmarks and it'll show up right there. We're just going to go to customers by using our bookmark, and this will take us to the customer dashboard where we can see all of our customers in a list. So what you can do here is search for any of your customers by using this smaller search bar, not the main search bar at the top, but this smaller one within the customers section. So if I start typing in a customer name, it'll show up and I can just click on it from here. You can also create a new customer by clicking on this green button up in the right-hand corner. If you are in the process of switching accounting softwares and you're moving data from your old system to QuickBooks Online, you can also hit this drop-down arrow, and that will let you import customers from a spreadsheet. You can also create customer types if you want to break down your customers by type. Maybe you have residential customers and commercial customers. Maybe you want to break it down some other way. You'll also see this money bar here. This is going to tell you how many invoices you have open along with the dollar amounts, how many invoices you have open and overdue with the dollar amounts. If you have any invoices that you've created but you haven't sent yet, those are going to show up under the unbilled income. And then if you have any estimates out there, those will show up right here. So let's actually get into one of these customers. To do that, again, you can either type the name into the search bar here and click on it from there, or you can hover over the customer name that you want to work with and then just click anywhere in the row. So now we're inside of Amy's Bird Sanctuary account. The new interface is actually doing some cool things, some cool AI things. For instance, we have this feature here that tells us QuickBooks drafted a reminder for an invoice open that's worth $239. So if we wanted to view that reminder and then send it to Amy's Bird Sanctuary, we could click on this blue review reminder button right here. We can also see from looking at the summary here, they do have an open balance of $239. So where's that coming from? If we scroll down a little bit, we'll see this orange exclamation point, meaning this invoice is open and past due. I can see that this invoice amount is for $459, but listed just over here in gray, it's telling us that this invoice is partially paid and there's a balance of $239 still due from the customer. So at the top of the page, we're going to see all of the general information for the customer. We've got the customer display name, the company name, any kind of customer information that you want highly visible, you can add as a note and that'll show up right here. And we've also got the billing address here. In the upper right-hand corner, we have some action items. We've got a button that says edit. This is going to let you edit any of the company information, the address, email address, phone number. We've also got the drop-down button here next to edit, which will allow you to either make your customer inactive or merge your contacts if you have a duplicate. You can't actually delete a customer in QuickBooks Online, but you can make it inactive. Don't worry, you can always reactivate it if you need it later. We also have merge contacts. So let's say you have a duplicate customer in your file with a slightly different name. So to merge contacts, just click on merge contacts. And then you're going to identify using this dropdown the customer that you want to get rid of. And using this dropdown on the bottom, you're going to identify the customer that you want to merge this customer into. One thing to note here is just make sure the customer that you are merging to has all the relevant information. Say the customer that you're merging the transactions from has the phone number, the email address, the billing address. If you merge that into a customer that doesn't have any of those criteria filled out, you're going to lose all that information. So just make sure you check that before you merge. Okay, our other action item up here is new transaction. So if we click on this button, we're going to see a whole list of options. This is where you can create a new invoice for your customer. You can record a payment. You can set up a recurring payment, create an estimate, create a sales order, create a sales receipt, all kinds of things in here, credit memo. So let's say we want to edit our customer. Maybe we want to add a phone number or an email address or a note or something. So we'll click on edit. Like I said, this is where all of the kind of general information for your customer lives. We've got the first and last name of the primary contact for this company. In this case, our customer is a company, so we've got a company name. That might not always be the case. You might just have an individual person as your customer. In that case, you would fill out the first name, the last name, and leave the company name blank. The customer display name is either going to pull from the customer name or the company name. So if we want to change that from Amy's Bird Sanctuary to Amy Lauterbach, all we do is hit this drop down arrow and click on Amy. And what this will do is it'll change this display name. We don't want to do that. We want to keep it as the company name. So we'll switch it back. As we can see, we've got an email address entered here, a phone number. There is an option to add a second email address in here, another phone number, a fax number, website, etc. If you're printing checks to this customer, you'll want to make sure you have this section filled in with the company name or the customer name, as well as the billing address. You can't really send a check without an address. So the billing address is going to be, if you scroll down a little bit under addresses, and then you have an option to create a shipping address if you want as well. Like I said, if you want to add any notes in here, you can do that. Let's say we only serviced this customer in April and May, and I want that information to be highly visible for my team. I could put that in the note and it should show up under the notes where it'll be super easy for anybody to see. If you have any kind of attachments for your customer, you can add those in here. And then if you charge your customers sales tax, that's going to be under the additional info section of this window. And then when we're finished, we can just hit save. So after we've saved that, we can see under the general info here that the note we just entered shows up right here on the main screen. We've also got this middle section of tabs. If you scroll over to customer details, it's going to show you all of the customer details that you've filled in. So you can play around with those a little bit. I don't really use those a whole lot. If we go back to the transaction list, the next thing on this screen is going to be these filters here. So let's say you have a customer that's got like 100 transactions and you're looking for something specific. You can actually use these filters to make what you're looking for a little bit easier to find. So let's say you're just looking for invoices. It'll show you just the invoices. Let's say you're looking for a credit memo. It'll show you just the credit memos. So that's kind of a nice feature. You can also search by any invoices that are open. If you're wondering what your customer owes you, again, that will show up here on the right-hand side of the screen. However, this is just going to show you the total outstanding and open balance. Down here, you're going to get more detailed information as far as which invoices make up that total amount due. You've also got some other action buttons over here on the right-hand side. You have the ability to print this page. You can download or export this page. If you click on the three dots here, this is going to show you some quick links to some common customer reports. And then the gear on the right-hand side, this is going to let you adjust the columns here. So maybe we want to know the open balance on invoices. We can click on balance. That'll create a separate column for the open balance on invoices. And then we also have an option to show us more rows per page. All right, let's say we want to create a new customer. What we need to do is go back to the main customers page by clicking on this blue customers button. From there, we can click on new customer. And then at the very minimum, I would say to fill out either the first and last name or the company name, and then an email address and a phone number, as well as a billing address. Okay, so let's move on to vendors. To get to vendors, again, you can get there a few different ways. You can go to all apps, expenses and bills, vendors. You can also just go straight to expenses, vendors, or if it's one of your bookmarks, you can get there from your bookmarks. Pro tip, I want to point out, and I actually use this a lot. If I'm searching for a specific customer or a specific vendor or a specific dollar amount even, a lot of times I'll just go up here to the search bar and start typing it in. So let's start typing in Amy's Bird Sanctuary. Okay, she's one of our customers. And if we scroll down to contacts, there she is. Let's say I'm searching for one of our vendors, Books by Bessie. I can just start typing in that name. And then if I scroll down to contacts, there's our vendor, Books by Bessie. Let's say I'm looking for a specific invoice number or invoice amount or bill amount. I can also put the invoice number up here. I can put the vendor bill amount or the customer invoice amount. I really love the search bar. I use it, like I said, all the time. So once you're under the vendor screen, it's going to look very similar to the customer screen. We've got the customer list here. We've got our little search bar where we can search vendors. We've got our action items up at the top here and our money bar showing what we still owe. So as you can see up top here, there's a pay vendors button if you want to record a payment to a vendor. This is actually not how I pay vendors. I don't use this button. This is definitely going to show up in a future video when I talk about customer invoices and vendor bills. The way that I pay or record bills in QuickBooks is I go to create and then I pay the bill from here. But I digress. We also see the button for new vendor if we want to create a new vendor. And then we have this drop down here. Again, if you're moving data from a different accounting software into QuickBooks Online, here's where you can import your vendors from an Excel sheet or something like that. To create a new vendor, we're going to click on new vendor. So first things for vendor is company name. Probably most of the time going to have a company name as opposed to an individual name for a vendor. Not necessarily, but most of the time. Again, at the very least, make sure you're entering an email address, a phone number, and then also the billing address. Pro tip. If you plan to pay this vendor with a check through QuickBooks, or you need to send this vendor a 1099, I would 100% encourage you to add the address and the email for the vendor. So obviously you can't send a vendor a check without the address. And you can't send a contractor a 1099 without an address. But entering the email address in there too, I believe when QuickBooks sends 1099s, they will also email it to the vendor. This also is a little off topic, but if you are a company that sends 1099s to subcontractors or anyone else that does any kind of service work for you, I 100% encourage you to use 1099 filing through QuickBooks. It's so easy. They file with the state, they file federally, and they send the 1099 to your vendor. You literally just click a few buttons, you pay a fee, obviously, and they do all of the other work. Okay, another pro tip and very important here for all of my people who do need to send 1099s. When you add your vendor, make sure you scroll down here to additional info. This is where you're actually going to add either the social security number if the contractor or the vendor is an independent contractor, or their EIN, their employee identification number, if they are an LLC or a corporation. You might be thinking, how do I know what that number is? What you need to do is request a W-9 from them when they start doing work for you. On this government form, they'll enter their address where you'll send their 1099 and either their social security number or their EIN, which is the number you'll enter here. And it should always always be a 9-digit number, if I'm not mistaken. If you are planning on sending this individual or contractor, vendor, a 1099, also make sure that you check this box here where it says track payments for 1099. This will tell QuickBooks to flag every payment that you've made to this vendor or individual. So when you're ready to file your 1099s, the whole year's worth of payments that you made to them are added up. You don't have to do any math. All right, another pro tip I want to give you guys. I told you there were a lot of them in this video. If you scroll down a little bit more, you're going to get to the accounting section. And in my opinion, this is one of the most underrated features in QuickBooks Online. But this is where it'll actually let you assign a default expense category to your vendor. So anytime you create a new transaction for this vendor, it will already assign the category. Now, it might not save a whole lot of time in the moment, but it will add up because QuickBooks automatically assigning the expense category means you don't have to sit there and think about how to categorize it. But this feature is best used if this vendor typically has the same expense category for every transaction or almost every transaction. So let's say the vendor is your landlord. You're always going to be paying your landlord rent, right? You're probably never going to use the expense category office supplies when it comes to your landlord. So what you could do here is assign the default expense category as rent, and anytime you create a new transaction under this vendor, it will default to rent. It's a really great feature. Okay, so let's talk about some common beginner mistakes. Common mistake number one, I would say, is creating too many names right off the bat. Let me tell you what I mean. You don't necessarily need a vendor for every single gas station where you get fuel. If you're going to 5 different gas stations a month for an entire year, that's 60 vendors just for gas stations. I would say this also goes for restaurants or coffee shops if you have client meetings or you buy lunch for your team often. So here's what happens when you do that. Your vendor list goes from this long to this long. It becomes cluttered and really hard to look at and use. Not only does the vendor list become cluttered, but the reports start to become hard to read. Having 60 different gas stations listed in your vendor list doesn't give you better financial insight. And in these cases, it's perfectly fine to just use a generic vendor like fuel expense or miscellaneous vendor. So let me show you how to set that up. So like I said, if I'm getting gas at a different gas station every week, that would be like 50 to 60 vendors. And I don't really want that in my QuickBooks file. So I would go to create new vendor. And for the company name, we're going to call this vendor fuel expense. And I'm going to use this vendor anytime I get fuel. Also, in this case, we're not going to have an email address to set up. We're not going to have a phone number. We're not going to have a billing address. And that's okay because we've already paid the gas station for our fuel. We don't really need to have their information in here to call them. You know, what would we call them for? All we're going to have under this vendor is the company name, which is, again, fuel expense. So then we'll hit save, and now we've got our new vendor fuel expense. So now anytime we have a fuel transaction come through, we're going to use fuel expense, this vendor, as our payee or our vendor, and we're going to categorize it as fuel. And then that expense would show up under this transaction list. Okay, common mistake number 2, confusing customers and vendors. If somebody pays you, but you also pay them, they should be set up as both a customer and a vendor. You should not use the vendor as your customer or vice versa. So for example, Amy's Bird Sanctuary, she is one of our customers. So we do landscaping work for her business. In other words, she pays us. Let's also say that we buy things from her. Maybe she's got some kind of a product or service that we purchase from her. So we want to make sure we set her up as also a vendor in QuickBooks Online. So to set her up as a vendor, we'll go to Vendors, New Vendor, and then we're going to start typing in Amy's Bird Sanctuary. Now, when I try to save this, I'm probably going to run into a problem. So as we can see, when I tried hitting save, we get this error message telling us that this name is already being used by a customer. So QuickBooks will not let you use the same exact name for a customer and a vendor, or a customer and another customer. They have to be slightly different, and this is by design, so customers and vendors don't get confused. So what we're going to do to bypass this and to prevent confusion is in parentheses next to Amy's Bird Sanctuary under the vendor, I'm going to write vendor. Now when I hit save this time, It's going to let us save the vendor. And now we'll know that this is without a doubt the vendor Amy's Bird Sanctuary, not the customer Amy's Bird Sanctuary. If you want, you can go and do the same thing with the customer Amy's Bird Sanctuary. You can go edit that customer name and add customer in parentheses. Okay, common mistake number 3, thinking that customer or vendor names replace accounts, meaning chart of accounts. So it's important to remember these are 2 different things. Accounts, as in the chart of accounts, like rent or office supplies. Those accounts tell QuickBooks what the transaction is for. On the other hand, vendors and customers are the who of the transaction, and those tell QuickBooks who the transaction is from or to. Sometimes people might think, well, I picked the right vendor, maybe QuickBooks will just figure it out. It won't. I wish it would, but it doesn't. QuickBooks doesn't guess when it comes to actually categorizing, unless you have a rule set up. It only records what you tell it to. So now you might be wondering, well, how detailed should I really get? I would say a good rule of thumb is if you have a recurring relationship with this customer or vendor, you should enter it as a customer or vendor. So let's stick with the same theme of fuel. So maybe you do get your fuel from the same gas station every time you fill up. If you always go to the Mobile, or you always go to Costco, or you always go to Quick Trip, I would say, yeah, go ahead and enter that specific vendor. If it's a one-off or a small transaction, you may not need it. The good thing is you can always add more detail to a transaction later. Okay, so that's customers and vendors. I hope this video helped you feel a little bit more confident using customers and vendors. Please give it a thumbs up so YouTube knows that it's helpful. Also, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any other videos in the series. As always, thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.